Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Laurie. Good morning. It's a great crowd and a great group here this morning. I want to take a few minutes to really talk about three different dimensions of the advent of artificial intelligence. First, we'll talk about what it is. And as you get to know a little bit about artificial intelligence, you'll know it's not as frightening as sometimes made out to be in television, movies, and videos. Secondly, what it means for us as workers, with the future of work, how we all are going to benefit from its use. And then thirdly, what this means for the future going forward, what it means for the workforce of the future, for our children, our grandchildren, for future generations. So first, let's talk a little bit about artificial intelligence. Imagine that you own an ice cream shop. I guess there's probably a pretty reasonable probability there's somebody in here that owns an ice cream shop or something pretty closely related to it. Now, we've called it an ice cream shop because we have to protect the identity for the innocent, for our work. But nonetheless, suppose you own this ice cream shop and you're going to have a number of interests. You'll want to know the number of employees you have to hire or have come to work on any given day. You'll want to know something about the ingredients, the materials, the supplies that you need. You'll want to be able to anticipate what the financial performance is. All of that starts with understanding what the business outlook is going to be in any given week, any given quarter, any given year. Predicting the business outcome, predicting what the revenue will be, what your sales will be in any given period of time is an example of an artificial intelligence application. We're predicting the future based on some knowledge of the business. Now, we all use artificial intelligence applications all the time, and I guarantee everybody in this room within the past, probably today, within the past hour, within the past day, has used artificial intelligence. When you're typing a text and it suggests to you what the word is you're trying to type, that is an artificial intelligence application. Or if you're typing an email. If you've used any translation services, speaking into your phone, getting translated into another language, that is an artificial intelligence application. But think about what that's done for you. It's helped you to be more productive, more effective. You can type that text faster. I can type a text in 3 or 4 characters and get a text off to my wife very easily. Likewise, if you're in your ice cream shop and you're predicting the business outcome, you can now manage your business in a more effective and a more productive way. Be able to understand how many people you need to have scheduled for work or hire, the ingredients and the materials that you need, and your financial performance. All of that is based on predicting a given outcome. Now, of course, businesses have always had this need. And we as analytics folks and economists have slaved away at these tasks for decades, but we've largely been limited to existing structured data sets. Of course, we have the past history of the organization. We have various structured data. We know something about the demographics of the neighborhood, the location, the geography, the industry. But typically, we can really only predict with any degree of confidence somewhere in the range of 30 to 40%. That's not a very good outcome if we're trying to plan a business. But now we have available to us large volumes of unstructured information. We can ingest large amounts of unstructured information and convert the unstructured information into structured data sets. So imagine, for example, if your ice cream shop is near a movie theater, and whatever the latest popular movie is, the Avengers, Black Panther, whatever, expecting a large crowd, you might anticipate that your sales are going to improve. Perhaps there's a competitor nearby. Maybe the competitor has something on offer that's attracting a crowd. That could be positive, it could be negative, but these are all inputs. One of the clients we did work for found out that in the geography they were in, when salsa is on sale, it turns out that sales increase enormously. Salsa is America's most consumed condiment, so that drives an enormous amount of sales. So being able to understand what's in the media, what's in the press, what's on the various websites, what's being communicated via Twitter, et cetera, other social media sites, social networking sites, are very important inputs and allow us to be able to predict with a very high probability, typically over 90%, the outcome that we're anticipating. So these are very useful tools, and they have a number of applications. The challenge that we face as business people is the transformation that our businesses have to go through. And becomes the ability to change our behavior, change the way organizations work, and to be able to incorporate the tools in a way that produces a business result, increased revenue, improved profitability. We really focus in 4 areas as we're trying to drive the improvement and drive the change and take the tools and make them useful from a business perspective. We think of this as the cognitive enterprise, the ability to be able to bring the tools together and alter the business processes and drive the business results. Training and education, of course, is very important. We need to help our workforce, our teams, understand the new business processes, the new tools, the new capabilities, and to be able to set that platform of support and education to be able to make the capability available. The transformation of our business processes. We have an expression we often say, we're not going to automate a broken process. We want to fix the business process and incorporate the new technology simultaneously. We don't want to apply the new technology to a broken business process. The results we've demonstrated to ourselves, sadly, on several occasions, is not a good outcome. Thirdly is the issue of data and infrastructure. Everybody, some of you I'm sure will have the reaction, well, you're IBM, your data are all organized in the most effective way. Turns out that's not the case, that we have the same issues managing our data that everybody else does, but nonetheless, focusing on the management, the governance, and the way the data are organized and displayed is a critical aspect of this. And finally, fourth and finally, is leadership. When the leaders in an organization understand and declare that these capabilities are useful, everybody follows along, particularly if you've done the training and you've done the revisions, if you will, the alteration of the business processes. So let's take a minute and let's think about some of the kinds of applications that we see. One of the most common uses of artificial intelligence, and perhaps one of the 2 largest opportunities to make use of artificial intelligence, is in the sales function. Now again, you all will be familiar already with some of these capabilities. When you get on a website, Amazon for instance, and it says, if you purchase this, you might like to buy that. That is the result of a recommendation engine. So my peer at Amazon has a large team of folks who do nothing but work on recommendation engines, because that's key. It's a critical aspect of their business to be able to have continued and repeat purchases. We're doing the same thing. We're helping our sellers understand our clients, their history, what they have, and what their next best offering might be. Also focused on prospective clients where we haven't done business. What's a likely recommendation? As you know, in the technology industry, there are many third parties that we work with, many of you in this room. We want to be able to take the results of our marketing activity and pass a sales lead or pass a sales opportunity to a partner. We want to do that in a way that predicts the best outcome for the partner and for the client. Likewise in pricing. Again, when your personal experience will tell you here, when you get on a website and it tells you what the price of a hotel room is going to be or something that you're looking to buy, that price has been calculated uniquely for you based on the prediction, again, I'm going to keep using the word prediction, that transaction will occur and that price will appeal to you relative to the value and the benefits that you see. We've also done a lot of work in the risk and compliance space in understanding where there are transactions that may be subject to some, shall we call it bad behavior. A second area that we've put a lot of focus on is around supply chain. Whether it's a manufacturing supply chain for goods, if you will, or in the services space, a people supply chain, the applications of artificial intelligence are quite significant. One of the demos you'll see outside here is Watson Compare and Comply. The ability to ingest large amounts of documentation from various vendors, contracts with clients, and understand what the requirements are a critical part of supply chain work. Whether it's being able to deliver the labor for a services engagement or deliver a set of materials and inputs for a manufacturing process, we need to be able to take in all of these requirements and to be able to translate them into an ability to manage that supply chain in a more efficient and effective way. Between the sales domain and the supply chain domain, this is really the two largest spaces where most of the work is going on and a large proportion of the opportunity currently exists, given the state of evolution that we're in today. But beyond the enterprise environment, you've also seen the applications that we've had in the healthcare space. So we've gotten a lot of attention over time with the applications of Watson in cardiology and radiology and oncology. And in fact, there's been significant work done here at UNC, at the Lineberger Comprehensive Cancer Center, looking at the performance of Watson as a diagnostic tool in comparison to the physicians working in a more traditional manner. And the research that's been done is actually quite interesting, that shows the effectiveness of how the tool improves the ability of physicians to diagnose and provide clinical care to patients. So all of these applications are ones that have improved the productivity, improved the effectiveness of those who are doing this work. All of the work that we've done in the sales domain, there aren't any sellers who've lost their jobs as a result of this. There are sellers who are earning more income, who are generating more sales. There are no supply chain workers who've lost their jobs. There is more information and more knowledge to address the risk and the challenge of the supply chain. And there are no physicians who've lost their jobs. In fact, there is more work for physicians to do than there is time to do it, so they've become more effective and indeed more satisfied in providing health care and medical care to their patients. So as we think about the transformation that the enterprise sector, that businesses around the world are going through, this is a place now where it inevitably will impact the workforce, us as workers, the labor market. So the other side of the enterprise transformation coin is the labor market transformation. And that's where we want to begin to think about what the impact on the labor market is likely to be. Now, there's a problem here. The problem is that our experience is really conditioned on the use of robotics in manufacturing. Robotics, of course, is intended to replace people with machines. We see it in the automotive industry, we see it in the electronics industry. Anywhere where there's a large form factor that robots can function very effectively, there have been enormous applications. The difficulty is that robotics is based on a rules-based technology in the manufacturing setting. Artificial intelligence, the kind of Watson capability that we demonstrate to you here today, is a completely different technology. It learns, it reasons, it understands. It improves the productivity of workers. So it's a natural human instinct to extrapolate our recent experience to the future, but in this case, it doesn't apply, because we're talking about a fundamentally different technology that is applied in fundamentally different ways. Now, I would never assert that there would be no jobs lost. That would be foolish. But the balance between replacing or displacing workers and improving productivity is shifting dramatically towards the productivity improvement side. The way we've begun to look at this, so it's easy for me to stand up here and assert that. The way we've begun to apply some data to get an empirical perspective on all of this is to think about the occupations that we all engage in. And as we look at occupations, a very interesting phenomenon occurs. It turns out that there are relatively few occupations that disappear. The occupations really are maintained for a very, very long period of time. Take the United States, for example. In the early 1900s, 40% of our labor force was in the agricultural sector. Today, 2 or 3% of our labor force is in the agricultural sector. A lot of jobs shifted to other sectors, but we still have the occupation of farming. But what do farmers do? Farmers do very different work today than they did 120 years ago. And in fact, the ability to do the planting and the irrigation has changed dramatically, largely as a result of the available technology. The joke among economists is that the only occupation that's ever disappeared is elevator operators. That actually technically is not true. There are still elevator operators in the Senate and House office buildings in Washington. That's a commentary by itself, I think, on what members of Congress need. But nonetheless, very few occupations disappear. But what has happened is that the tasks that we all perform as part of these occupations have shifted dramatically. I mean, you probably can think about your own experience in your own discipline, your own occupations. The work that we do today is very different from what it might have been 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. And it's this remixing of tasks. So while we assert a relatively small number of occupations will disappear, a relatively small number of jobs will disappear, 100% of occupations will transform the tasks that they perform. That may be a little bit of an exaggeration, but it's just to make the point. Work is changing, not because occupations and jobs are disappearing, but because the way we do work is changing. All of this occurs in the context of a global environment that's changing very rapidly. A very significant event has occurred over the past 15 years that has impacted certainly the US economy in a significant way, and that's the re-entry of China into the global economy. So, as you may know, China was the world's leading economy for 1,000 years. It disappeared for 150 years. the middle of the 1800s, 1850, 1860, became very inward focused. The early 2000s, 2001, was ascended into the World Trade Organization and has now become very much the world's factory. So import competition has had a major impact on the manufacturing sector. The impact of technology has been somewhat less, even with the advent of robotics, and there are now very precise measurements around these points. However, China, like most other nations, recognizes where the technology is going. So the leadership in China is driving a very significant investment in the technology, just as we all are focused on the technology here in North America. Secondly, demographics. The world is getting older. There are fewer babies being made, particularly in North America, Western Europe, Japan, and China. So the growth of the labor force is slowing in the industrialized countries plus China. Economic growth is a function of the growth of the labor force and the growth of productivity. If we don't have the labor force growing rapidly enough, we need productivity to grow more rapidly, and that's where the technology comes in. So it's the supply side constraints of the labor force, the demographics, that's creating enormous pressure on the productivity side for the technology that we want to be able to put in place. So all of this is having a very significant impact on how labor markets are transforming, how the global economy is transforming. Now, we've gone through this in the past. Historically, this is, in my view, the fifth such epoch where major technological changes have occurred. If we think back to one of the previous epochs, in the late 19th century and early 20th century, there was a significant movement to improve the level of education, the high school education movement. I'm sure many of you here will have had parents or grandparents or great-grandparents who completed only a few years of schooling, as did I. By the early 20th century, it was accepted that we would complete a minimum of 12 years of education. The high school education movement put in place a level of skill. In addition, by the way, those who were returning from World War II and the GI Bill and other such benefits. But the high school education movement became very important in preparing the workforce, certainly here in the US and other industrialized countries as well, for the industrial era that we saw in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. It was a major social transformation that allowed workers to become more productive, to see significant increases in income, and for us all to benefit from a significant increase in our standards of living. I'm asserting that we're going to see such a significant social transformation going forward in the decades ahead. It won't be about high school education. We've done that. And it's always a little difficult to imagine what the world will look like 20 or 30 years from now. But we're in a race. We're in a race between the transformation of technology and the social, cultural, and political transformation necessary to gain the benefits of that technology. And the nations who are most successful in that race are those who are going to benefit. So what kind of actions do we expect to see? So we think about the future, shaping the future. Clearly, I think we would all agree that education is important. One example of a program that we have created and very much been focused on is a program we call P-TECH, which takes and helps young people complete 14 years of education, so additional levels of education, in occupations that are in greater demand, And these tend to be young people who are disadvantaged in some way that we can help, our teams can help mentor and monitor their careers and provide them with guidance and advice. There are about 125,000 schools participating in this around the world. There are about 10,000 students in the US across 7 states. Many of the governors and certainly here in North Carolina, have been very supportive of this effort. But it's an illustration of how business and government can work together to create a new educational approach to allow students to be able to move from higher levels of education into work in a consistent way. Secondly, the notion of mid-career transition. It's unfortunate today that many workers find themselves in a position where they don't have the skills for the jobs that are becoming available. We would assert we ought to be thinking ahead. We ought to be planning ahead. We ought to be helping that mid-career transition to occur with the skill and the training provided in advance of when it's likely to be needed. Again, using IBM as an example, making a substantial investment in training, partnering with a number of community colleges, and focusing on a large number of folks who can benefit from retraining, including a substantial number of US veterans. And I personally have worked with a number of those programs and organizations helping our veterans. Third and finally, the notion of a new social contract. What commitment are we all willing to make, I would ask, to help create success over the course of 20 or 30 years? What is the role of government? How is it different? What is the role of business? How is it going to be different? What's the commitment of the individual? As individuals, we all need to make a commitment. And what does that contract, that contractual commitment look like? How is it different from what it's been in the past? These are the kinds of questions I believe we need to answer as we think about the race that we're in to transform the social, political, and cultural dimensions of our lives to keep pace with the technology. The final dimension of our work is to think about this in the context of how we use and manage the technology. Our view is that we need to adhere to a set of principles, that the technology can be used for good or it can be used for the, let me say, not so good. And we certainly see some of those aspects in some of the cyber attacks that we see around the world. So we're committed to, first of all, augmenting human intelligence. This is a capability to help improve the productivity of workers and organizations. Two sides of that coin. Number two, skills. We've talked about the new social contract, the new skills that are needed, and the commitment that we've made to those skills. And then third, transparency. Being able to explain and understand the technology, the results that are being produced, how they're being produced, the data that are being used, how models are being trained. It's a very difficult topic, and I'm sure there'll be questions and controversy, but the notion of transparency is one that we're very much committed to. So we can end by saying the future is going to be different from the past. There's no, that we can say, I think, with a high degree of confidence and certainty. The issue is, how are we going to benefit? How are we going to take advantage of the opportunity that we have today as we think forward, not just for the next year or not just the next few years, but the next few decades? There are tremendous benefits available, but it's going to depend upon our ability to take advantage of the opportunities that we've been handed. Thank you very much. Great, perfect.